The alien doctor laughed at human biology until the test results came back. Dr. Zalnora of the Virelian Collective had seen many strange species in her career as a xenobiologist. Her people were known for their calm demeanor, their advanced technology, and their highly logical way of approaching life. They had catalogued thousands of life forms across the galaxy, always with the understanding that their biology was superior, efficient, perfected over millennia. When Dr. Zalnora was assigned to a new post on the bustling intergalactic station, she was intrigued. A human ship had just docked, and the crew had been sent to undergo routine health checks. She had never personally examined a human before, and her curiosity was piqued. Of course, she had read about them, short-lived, weak in comparison to the other species she had studied, with bodies prone to disease and injury. Her initial impression? A fleeting, fragile species, hardly worth the attention of the galaxy's best minds. As the humans filed into her examination room, Zalnora prepared herself for the usual drill, a simple scan of their vitals, a few tests, and she would move on to more important matters. She was particularly curious about their so-called immune systems, as she had read they were notorious for being prone to infections and illnesses. She wondered how such a fragile species managed to survive at all. One by one, the humans sat down in front of her, exchanging nervous glances. They were mostly young, wearing the standard uniforms of their spacefaring species, bright, functional, and completely unimpressive. Zalnora couldn't help but let out a small chuckle as she began her scan. The results came in, and she glanced at the first test subject, Lieutenant Sarah Greer, a young woman who appeared fit, healthy, and ordinary in every way. Zalnora's gaze narrowed as she reviewed the data. Unbelievable, she muttered under her breath, adjusting the controls. The scan showed unusual patterns of resilience in Sarah's cells. Her immune system was incredibly efficient, almost to the point of being absurd. Your species can regenerate tissue at an alarming rate, Zalnora said, more to herself than the human before her. How do you not succumb to constant injury or disease? Sarah smiled, unfazed. It's just how we're built. Zalnora raised an eyebrow but didn't let her surprise show. She moved on to the next test subject, Sergeant Marcus Jensen. His results were even more bizarre. Not only did his immune system show resilience, but his body produced complex antibodies that Zalnora had never encountered before. He could fight off infections in a matter of hours, something no species in the galaxy could do. She scanned another human, then another, and the results were all the same. With every test, her skepticism began to erode. These humans, fragile, short-lived, weak, seemed to possess a biological advantage no one had anticipated. What are you doing to yourselves? Zalnora asked, now fully intrigued. How are you able to survive such hostile environments? Your bodies, how can they heal so quickly? One of the humans, a scientist named Dr. Alden Price, leaned forward, a knowing smile on his face. Dr. Zalnora, humans have always been resilient. It's a defining trait of our species. Resilient? Zalnora asked, still unsure. I've never seen such rapid healing in any species, let alone your frail physiology. Your bones are fragile, your organs delicate, and yet your cells seem to repair themselves at a rate I've never seen before. Alden nodded. We don't just survive in hostile environments, we thrive. It's something we've developed over countless generations. But there's something you missed, Doctor. Zalnora paused, her mind racing. What do you mean? Your scans didn't show it clearly, but I'll explain, Alden said, his eyes gleaming. The human body is adaptable. We aren't just resilient to illness. We're resilient to everything. Our bodies can adapt and evolve in real time. If we face a challenge, our cells begin to change, sometimes even within hours. It's like we're constantly evolving, always one step ahead of the threats we face. Zalnora stood still, processing the information. Her mind began to race as she considered the implications. This was not just a physical adaptation. It was something deeper, something genetic. The human species didn't merely endure the harshness of the universe, they adapted to it. That is incredible, she whispered, staring at the data once more. In all my years of studying life forms, I've never encountered a species with such a dynamic ability. You're more than resilient. You're evolving in real time. Alden gave her a small nod. Exactly. And that's just the start. We don't just fight illness. We fight against failure, against anything that tries to break us. Zalnora blinked, her usual calm and confident demeanor wavering. She had thought she knew the limits of biology, how species would adapt to their environments. But humans? They were something else entirely. A species constantly pushing against the limits of nature itself. As the testing concluded, Zalnora found herself deep in thought. She had spent her career studying species that were often lauded for their strength, their grace, their intelligence, but none of them, not a single one, could compare to the tenacity of the human race. As the humans left her examination room, she turned back to the results, her thoughts swirling. For the first time in her life, she felt something close to awe and emotion that, in her vast experience, she had rarely allowed herself to indulge in. Well, I suppose I've been wrong about humans, she mused aloud, her voice tinged with admiration. Your biology may not be perfect, but it's certainly something the universe has never seen before. And as the humans walked away, smiling to themselves, Dr. Zalnora knew that no matter how advanced the Virilian collective was, there was one thing that would always separate them from humans: resilience. The test results had spoken, and now the galaxy would have to reckon with the undeniable truth. The human race wasn't just here to survive, they were here to conquer. The alien doctor laughed at human biology until the test results came back. Part 2. Weeks passed, and Dr. Zalnora couldn't shake the thoughts of the humans and their remarkable biology. It was an obsession she couldn't ignore. Every time she closed her eyes, the image of their cells, regenerating at impossible speeds, flashed in her mind. She had delved deeper into the data, running simulations and cross-referencing the results with known species from across the galaxy. But nothing compared to what she had witnessed in those humans. Her colleagues, the other xenobiologists on the station, were not nearly as impressed. To them, humans were an anomaly, curious but hardly worth spending too much time on. They dismissed Zalnora's findings as a fluke, a temporary curiosity that would soon be explained by more standard evolutionary mechanisms. But Zalnora couldn't let go. There was something about them that defied everything she had known about life and biology. How could a species, so seemingly fragile, possess such an ability to adapt so swiftly and so profoundly? Determined to find the answers, Zalnora sent a request to the human crew to undergo a more extensive examination. She wanted to dig deeper into the human genome, to understand exactly what made them capable of such rapid biological evolution. To her surprise, they agreed. This time, the humans didn't just include the usual crew members, they sent their top geneticists and biologists. A high-ranking officer, Captain Eleanor Hayes, accompanied them as well. Her presence was a mark of the importance the humans placed on this study, and it left Zalnora intrigued. When Captain Hayes walked into her lab, Zalnora greeted her with a quiet nod, still wrestling with the tension in her mind. Hayes, as always, appeared composed and calm, exuding the quiet confidence that had made her so respected among her peers. Dr. Zalnora, Captain Hayes said, her voice measured, I understand you've made some unusual discoveries about human biology. What's this about our genome being dynamic? Zalnora motioned toward a set of seats. I've requested your top experts because I need to understand how you function on a genetic level. What I've seen in your people is something beyond anything I've encountered. I believe your biology is rewriting the very laws of evolution. Hayes raised an eyebrow but took a seat. You're not wrong. We've been doing some research of our own. Zalnora looked up, intrigued. Research? Hayes smiled. You're aware of our history, I assume. We've been to war, faced environmental collapse, and been on the brink of extinction more than once. And yet, we're still here. We've always adapted. The human genome is not as static as other species. It doesn't follow the traditional path of evolution, it accelerates it. Zalnora's eyes widened, and her voice caught in her throat. You're saying your species intentionally accelerates evolution? Not intentionally, Hayes explained, but it's in our nature. Humans have always had to adapt quickly. The pressures of our environment, the wars we've fought, the diseases we've battled, our bodies learn to evolve in response. The gene sequences that govern our adaptability have been honed over centuries. We don't just survive in the face of adversity, we change with it. Zalnora paused, trying to process this new information. But that shouldn't be possible. Evolution should take millennia to occur. How can you manage such changes within a lifetime? Hayes leaned forward. That's the thing about humans. We've developed a form of genetic plasticity. It's a rare trait among species. If our body encounters a new threat, whether it's a disease or environmental factor, our cells immediately begin adjusting. It's almost as if we're pre-programmed to evolve as fast as we need to. But your species has been accelerating evolution over such a short time, Zalnora said, still skeptical. How could something like that even be possible without catastrophic consequences? A human geneticist sitting beside Zalnora spoke up. It's a side effect of human history. The need for adaptability has been so intense that we've developed these highly efficient mutation pathways. In times of crisis, the mutations are more profound, more rapid, but in times of peace, our biology maintains balance. We don't go around mutating constantly. It's more of a reactive process. The geneticist pulled up a visual display of the human genome. It was a vast network of interconnected sequences, with certain strands glowing brighter than others. These gene sequences, he continued, are triggered when exposed to extreme stressors. It's not just random mutation, it's targeted, with the purpose of making the human body more resilient. That's why humans can fight off infections and injuries in ways no other species can. Zalnora stared at the display, mesmerized. She had seen many genomes in her lifetime, but nothing like this. Humans weren't simply surviving in the galaxy. They were reshaping their very biology to meet every challenge that came their way. Captain Hayes sat back in her chair, her tone softening. The truth is, Doctor, humans don't just live on this planet or in this galaxy. We've learned to thrive everywhere. Zalnora sat back in her chair, awestruck. You've become something else. You're not just a species. You're an organism that chooses its destiny. The room was silent for a long moment. Dr. Zalnora, so sure of her species' supremacy just weeks ago, felt small in the face of this revelation. The humans before her were more than just survivors. They were a testament to the power of evolution, and to the tenacity of a species that would never, ever be counted out. No matter the odds, no matter the challenge, the human race could and would adapt. And in that moment, Zalnora understood the true strength of humanity, their ability to bend and break the very rules of biology, and rewrite them as they saw fit. A species that, given enough time, could make the universe its own. Then, I suppose, there's no limit to what you can accomplish, is there? Zalnora asked quietly. No limit, Captain Hayes agreed, her voice resolute. We've only just begun. The alien doctor laughed at human biology until the test results came back. Part 3. Months had passed since Dr. Zalnora's first encounter with the humans, and the curiosity she had once felt for their biology had turned into a consuming fascination. She had worked tirelessly in her lab, running tests, reanalyzing genetic data, and even traveling to human colonies to see if what they had discovered on the station was an anomaly. Every time she delved deeper into the human genome, the more she found an astonishing adaptability that was even greater than she had first imagined. But one thing had nagged at her. Despite all the data and the overwhelming evidence, there was one aspect of human biology that still eluded her, the source of their rapid evolutionary response. No species she had ever studied had displayed such profound genetic flexibility. It was as if the humans' bodies were not merely reacting to the environment, they were anticipating it. She needed to know how. Dr. Zalnora finally decided to visit Earth itself. She had learned much from the humans on the station, but the planet where they had evolved, the world that had birthed them, held answers that no study or simulation could provide. She sent her request to Captain Eleanor Hayes, and much to her surprise, the captain herself extended an invitation for Zalnora to join her team on Earth. As the Virillian ship descended into Earth's atmosphere, Zalnora gazed out of the viewport, mesmerized by the blue and green orb below. The planet was teeming with life, vast forests, enormous oceans, and a diversity of ecosystems that made even the most impressive planetary biospheres Zalnora had encountered seem dull in comparison. Earth wasn't just a home to the humans, it was the origin of their exceptional ability to adapt. Upon landing, Zalnora was immediately struck by the contrast between the planet's natural beauty and the human-built structures that sprawled across its surface. The human race had long since developed cities, advanced technology, and a society that had, against all odds, learned to thrive amidst the harshest of environments. But there was something else, something in the air, something in the very soil that made Earth so unique. She was led to a research facility nestled in the heart of a vast rainforest, a place where humans had been studying their own evolution for centuries. The researchers here specialized in understanding how humans adapted to the planet's ever-changing conditions, how their biology responded not just to the natural world, but to each other, to their culture, and even to their technology. Captain Hayes was there to greet her. "Welcome to Earth, Dr. Zalnora," she said with a grin. "We thought you'd like to see where it all started." Zalnora, still somewhat in awe of the planet's natural beauty, nodded. "Thank you, Captain. I have spent so many years studying human biology, but being here, on the very planet where your species first arose, I feel as though I'm standing on the edge of something I can't fully comprehend." "You're not alone in that," Hayes replied, her tone thoughtful. "There's a lot about humans that even we don't fully understand." The facility they entered was vast, filled with researchers poring over data, testing samples, and conducting experiments. But in the center of it all was a massive data core, the culmination of years of research on the human genome, examining the genetic triggers that allowed humanity to adapt so rapidly. Zalnora was led into a high-tech lab where the head scientist, Dr. Julian Veers, was working on a live experiment. His team had been studying the ancient remnants of human ancestors, tracing back to the very origins of the human species. "Dr. Zalnora." Dr. Veers greeted her warmly, though his expression was intense. "I've heard a lot about you. We're thrilled to have you here." Zalnora inclined her head in acknowledgement, but her focus was already on the display before her. Dr. Veers had been running tests on DNA from a variety of ancient human ancestors, species that predated Homo sapiens by millions of years. These tests weren't just about understanding the past. They were about finding the source of humanity's ability to evolve so quickly. "Dr. Zalnora," Veers said, his voice soft with excitement, "what we've discovered could change everything we thought we knew about evolution. It's not just about survival. It's about control." Zalnora looked up at him, confused. "Control? You mean, humans are consciously influencing their own evolution?" Dr. Veers nodded. "Not consciously, no, but something in our genetics has given us the ability to direct our evolution. Ancient humans were faced with constant challenges, natural disasters, shifting climates, disease outbreaks. Over time, their genetic makeup adapted to those pressures in ways we're only now beginning to understand." He turned toward a holographic display, showing a timeline of the human species' evolution. It was like nothing Zalnora had ever seen, massive bursts of change, sometimes within just a few generations. "What you're seeing," Veers continued, "are genetic markers that we call adaptive accelerators. These markers are scattered throughout the human genome, dormant for most of human history, but in moments of extreme stress, whether environmental, biological, or psychological, these markers are activated. They trigger a chain reaction of genetic mutations and adaptations that allow humans to survive and thrive in situations where other species would fail." Zalnora stared at the display, her mind racing. "You're telling me that humans have a genetic code that can choose to evolve when necessary? That's impossible." Dr. Veers smiled. "That's what we thought, too, but as we've researched more and more, we've found that these adaptive accelerators are far more complex than we ever imagined. They don't just respond to outside pressures, they interact with each other, forming a network that actively rewrites the genetic code when the species needs it most." Zalnora's eyes widened as she saw the implications. It wasn't just that humans could survive adversity, they could direct their evolution in response to it. Their bodies, their very genetic makeup, had become a tool to reshape themselves on a level that no other species had ever achieved. "There's more," Dr. Veers said. "These adaptive accelerators are still active today. Every human on Earth carries them. But now, we've unlocked a way to control them, to selectively trigger genetic changes in response to specific challenges." Zalnora was silent for a long moment, absorbing the magnitude of what she had just heard. It was no longer just a question of survival, it was a question of dominion over nature itself. She turned to Captain Hayes, who was watching her with a knowing expression. "This explains everything. Your species wasn't just built to adapt. You're designed to adapt by forces beyond your understanding. Hayes nodded. Exactly. And we've only just begun to scratch the surface of what we can do with this ability. The future of humanity isn't just about GV the galaxy. It's about shaping it. Zalnora took a deep breath, finally understanding the true strength of the human species. They were no longer just survivors, they were the masters of their own evolution. And as she stood on Earth, surrounded by the very essence of human resilience and adaptability, she knew one thing for certain. The universe had just met its most formidable force, and it was human. The alien doctor laughed at human biology until the test results came back. Part 4. The tension in the Federation had reached a boiling point. Humanity's rapid rise, their unmatched adaptability, and their ability to form unexpected alliances had become a focal point for many species who had long held power and influence over the galaxy. The Gorthrax, who had always dominated in strength, now saw humanity's growing influence as a direct challenge to their place at the top. The Ivril, brilliant and calculating, began to question whether human diplomacy was simply a prelude to a deeper, more dangerous agenda. Even the Ralkans, while cooperating with humanity, began to distrust their growing presence in galactic politics. Dr. Zaldar had seen this coming. He had observed the subtle shifts in interspecies relations, the undercurrent of fear that had begun to spread throughout the galaxy. Humanity had become something far greater than anyone had anticipated, and it was clear that not everyone was ready to accept this new reality. A clandestine meeting was called by the Federation Council. Dr. Zaldar, now one of the foremost experts on human biology and adaptability, was summoned to the council chambers to address an urgent matter. The once calm and peaceful Federation was now teetering on the brink of a political crisis. Humans, despite their diplomatic successes, were at risk of becoming the target of a galactic backlash. Dr. Zaldar entered the council room, his mind focused on the task at hand. It had become increasingly clear that the galactic powers were divided, those who recognized humanity's potential and those who feared it. The council, in an effort to prevent full-scale conflict, had requested a solution. Counselor Alric Tlaz, the Viran diplomat who had been one of humanity's greatest supporters, addressed Dr. Zaldar. Doctor, we need your expertise. We are at a crossroads. We cannot deny humanity's biological and social adaptability, but their rise has sparked fear among the more established powers. The Gorthrax demand that we limit human military influence. The Ivril suggest they be monitored more closely for ulterior motives. And the Ralkans, they worry about the balance of power in the galaxy. We need a solution that preserves peace. Dr. Zaldar stood silent for a moment, weighing his options. The more he thought about it, the clearer it became. Humanity's greatest strength, their adaptability, was both their greatest gift and their greatest threat. Could they truly be trusted to integrate into the galactic community without destabilizing it? I believe, Dr. Zaldar began, his voice steady, that humanity's adaptability is not something to fear. Rather, it is something that can be harnessed for the benefit of all. What makes humans dangerous, Counselor Tlaz, is their unpredictability. It is not a threat that comes from their biology, but from their ability to change the course of events in ways no one can foresee. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. The council members shifted in their seats, sensing the gravity of what he was about to say. Humans can adapt to any challenge. True, but they also have a remarkable ability to improvise in the face of the unknown. They do not simply follow the rules of their predecessors, they create their own path. This, I believe, is what makes them invaluable. Dr. Zaldar turned to face the council. The solution, then, is not to isolate or restrict humanity. Rather, we must allow them to be part of the larger galactic framework, but on a level that ensures their adaptability is guided. A council of human representatives, chosen not for their strength or military prowess, but for their ability to negotiate, adapt, and find new solutions to problems, could serve as a neutral force within the Federation. The room was silent as the council members processed this idea. The concept of a human-led diplomatic council was revolutionary. Could humanity, with its unrelenting flexibility, really be trusted to mediate between the galaxy's most powerful species? Would this proposal bring unity, or spark even more division? Counselor Tlaz finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. Dr. Zaldar, You have seen the best and worst of humanity. Do you believe that they can truly bring peace to the Federation? Or will their adaptability create more conflict? The question hung in the air, and for a moment, Dr. Zaldar hesitated. The truth was, he didn't have all the answers. Humanity's potential was both vast and unpredictable. But one thing was certain, humanity had already changed the course of the galaxy, and it would never be the same again. Whether it was for better or worse, humanity was no longer a species that could be ignored or underestimated. I believe, Dr. Zaldar said finally, that humanity will be a catalyst for the galaxy's future. Their adaptability is not a tool for conquest. It is a tool for innovation. And in a galaxy that is constantly evolving, we will need them more than ever. The council debated long into the night, but Dr. Zaldar's words had struck a chord. In the days that followed, the proposal for a human-led diplomatic council was presented to the Federation as a whole. The response was mixed. Some species embraced the idea, while others resisted it fiercely. The Gorthrax, particularly, were not convinced. Their leaders called for a public debate, arguing that humans were too unpredictable, too dangerous to be trusted with any form of power. The Ivril, ever calculating, proposed a series of mental evaluations and tests to determine whether humanity could be trusted with such influence. But in the end, the Federation Council voted overwhelmingly in favor of integrating humanity into the diplomatic process on their own terms. The decision was made: humanity would take a more active role in shaping the future of the galaxy. Captain Eliza Tran, who had been at the forefront of humanity's rise within the Federation, was appointed as the first representative of humanity to the Council. The moment was a historic one, as humans were granted a permanent seat at the table, a position they had never held before. Dr. Zaldar watched as Captain Tran took her place among the Federation's leaders. He had once seen humans as a curiosity, something to be studied, to be analyzed. But now, he saw them for what they truly were, the architects of a new era. The galaxy would never be the same again. Humanity's rise, fueled by their biology and their extraordinary adaptability, had set in motion a chain of events that would reshape the entire galactic order. They were no longer just survivors, they were the future. And as for Dr. Zaldar, he found himself contemplating the question that had haunted him since the beginning: what does it mean for a species to be unstoppable? The answer, he now understood, was this: humanity would not be defeated, not by any force, not by any power, because their true strength didn't lie in their biology, or their technology, or their strategies. It lay in their ability to change, to adapt, and to reshape the galaxy in their image. And that, Dr. Zaldar realized, was the most powerful force in the universe. End of Part 4. Would you like to continue the story, or explore any other directions? The alien doctor laughed at human biology until the test results came back. Part 5. Months had passed since Dr. Zalnora's revelation on Earth, but the lessons she had learned during her time with the humans continued to echo in her mind. The genetic potential of humanity had reshaped everything she knew about biology, and she could no longer simply view them as a quirky species with an odd ability to adapt. They were no longer just survivors, they were on the brink of mastering their own evolution. But as much as she tried to shake the feeling, something still gnawed at her. The more she learned about humans, the more she realized that their power came with a cost. Control over their biology was both their greatest strength and their most dangerous weapon. What happened when this power was pushed too far? Could it lead to something that humanity could no longer contain? Dr. Zalnora couldn't ignore the warnings that had been quietly murmured in the back of her mind. Humanity's ability to adapt was unparalleled, but could they control it forever? It wasn't long before Zalnora's fears began to materialize. On a cold evening aboard the Verilian research station, a message came through from Captain Hayes. The subject line was simple but alarming: urgent. Zalnora immediately opened the message, her heart pounding as she read the contents. Dr. Zalnora. We need your help. Something has happened to one of our colonies on the fringe of human space. We don't understand it fully yet, but it's spreading quickly, and we think it's a result of the genetic research we've been conducting. There have been reports of strange mutations, accelerated, uncontrolled, spreading across the population. We need your expertise. We believe this may be the unintended consequence of what we've unlocked. Please, come as soon as you can. Captain Eleanor Hayes. Zalnora's mind raced. She had feared something like this might happen, but she had never anticipated that the consequences would come so soon. She immediately contacted her superiors on the Varillian Council, requesting permission to travel to the human colony. Time was of the essence, and she knew that if this mutation spiraled out of control, it could mean disaster, not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. Within hours, she was on her way to the human colony, her heart heavy with uncertainty. The stars outside her ship's viewport were a blur of light as the craft shot through the galaxy, each moment bringing her closer to the colony and, potentially, to a catastrophe. When she arrived, the situation was even worse than she had imagined. The colony, once a bustling hub of human innovation, was now a ghost town. The streets were eerily empty, and the buildings, which had been constructed with human ingenuity, stood silent and abandoned. But it wasn't the silence that frightened Zalnora. It was the signs of unnatural growth and change. Human bodies had begun to undergo bizarre mutations. Some of the colony's citizens had sprouted additional limbs. Others had developed strange, even alien features. The mutations seemed to be random, and the process was accelerating with terrifying speed. It was as if the adaptive accelerators within the human genome were no longer simply responding to external stimuli, they were running rampant, uncontrollably rewiring the very essence of humanity's biology. Zalnora met Captain Hayes at the colony's medical facility. Hayes looked grim, her normally calm demeanor shattered by the crisis at hand. "I never thought it would go this far," Hayes said quietly, standing next to Zalnora as they surveyed the lab. "We thought we had control over the accelerators. We never imagined something like this could happen." Zalnora nodded, her mind racing. The adaptive accelerators are more powerful than we realized. They were meant to help humanity survive, to change in response to threats. But if they're activated too frequently, or if the pressure is too great, the mutations they cause can become unstable. This is the result of that instability. "What do we do now?" Hayes asked, her voice tight with desperation. Zalnora's gaze fell on the mutants in the holding chambers. The changes they had undergone were extreme, and their minds seemed to be affected by the mutations as well. It was clear that these people had been overwhelmed by their own biology, lost in the wave of transformation. They were no longer entirely human. "First, we need to isolate the accelerators and figure out what triggered this outbreak. If we can shut them down, we might be able to stop the mutations from spreading further. But we have to act quickly. If this continues, the entire colony could be lost." As Zalnora worked tirelessly with Hayes and the human medical team, they discovered that the mutations were linked to a recent experiment on the colony. In an effort to push the boundaries of human adaptability, scientists had injected a new compound into the population, an attempt to further accelerate the adaptive process. They had hoped to make humanity stronger, faster, and more resilient. Instead, they had unlocked a Pandora's box. The compound had interfered with the accelerators, causing them to malfunction and spiral out of control. The mutations weren't simply a reaction to the environment, they were the product of an evolutionary process gone awry. The human genome was no longer adapting to external threats. It was mutating in random, chaotic ways, without any checks or balances. With every passing hour, the situation grew more dire. The mutants became increasingly unstable, and the unaltered humans were beginning to show signs of contamination. Zalnora knew that the only way to stop this was to neutralize the gene sequence that was causing the mutations, but that was easier said than done. "We need to shut down the adaptive accelerators, or we risk losing everything," Zalnora said urgently, her voice carrying an edge of fear she couldn't conceal. Hayes nodded. "We're working on it. But how do we reverse the mutations that have already occurred?" "That's the real question," Zalnora replied. "If we can't halt the process in time, the mutations could spread beyond this colony. We'll have an entire population of unstable humans, and no way to contain it." The urgency of the situation hit both of them like a tidal wave. Zalnora had once been so impressed by humanity's ability to adapt, to control their evolution. But now, standing in the midst of a catastrophe of their own making, she realized just how dangerous that power could be. It was a double-edged sword, one that could cut through anything, but could also destroy the wielder. The clock was ticking. The stakes were higher than ever. And if they didn't find a solution, humanity might not just be changed, they might cease to be human at all. We have to stop it, Zalnora, Hayes said, her voice unwavering despite the fear in her eyes. We can't let this be the end of us. Zalnora met Hayes's gaze, determination hardening her features. We won't let it be the end. We'll find a way to fix this. But deep down, Zalnora knew that the consequences of humanity's ability to control their biology had only just begun to reveal themselves. What had started as an extraordinary strength had, in an instant, become their greatest threat. And she wasn't sure if even she could stop it. The alien doctor laughed at human biology until the test results came back. Part 6. The air inside the medical facility was thick with tension as Dr. Zalnora and Captain Hayes worked side by side, desperately searching for a way to reverse the effects of the genetic instability sweeping through the colony. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the halls, punctuated by the occasional beeping of alarms from medical consoles. The situation had escalated faster than anyone had expected, and they were running out of time. Zalnora had been at the forefront of alien biology for centuries, but the sight of so many humans, so many innocent lives, being torn apart by their own biology shook her to her core. This wasn't just an anomaly. This was a catastrophic breakdown of everything that made humanity unique. The accelerators had gone haywire, and now the very people they were meant to protect were becoming unrecognizable, both physically and mentally. Zalnora stood over a diagnostic table, her long, delicate fingers hovering over a holographic interface as she reviewed the data streaming in from the colony's research labs. The mutations were unpredictable, each one more bizarre than the last. Some humans had developed new organs, while others had sprouted additional appendages or even grown entirely new sensory organs. Worse yet, the process was accelerating. What had started as a minor mutation was rapidly evolving into something far more dangerous. It's like a virus, Zalnora murmured, her voice grim. The adaptive accelerators have become a self-replicating mechanism. Each mutation feeds into the next, compounding the instability. The human genome is no longer simply adapting, it's mutating beyond recognition. Captain Hayes stood beside her, her expression taut with concern. Can we stop it? Reverse the changes? I don't know, Zalnora replied honestly, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. We need to isolate the genetic pathways that are malfunctioning and attempt to stabilize them. But the longer we wait, the harder it will be to stop this from spreading further. We don't have time, Hayes said, clenching her jaw. The population is spiraling out of control. If this continues, we'll lose them all. Zalnora nodded, her mind racing. We may have to attempt something radical. We could try shutting down the adaptive accelerators altogether. But that could result in further destabilization, perhaps even death for those who have already undergone significant mutations. Hayes's eyes narrowed with resolve. We can't let this spread to other colonies. We'll have to take that risk. Zalnora considered the captain's words. She had known from the beginning that humanity's control over its evolution came with great risk. They had unlocked the potential to shape their destiny, but they had also unleashed something dangerous. The very mechanism that allowed humans to survive and adapt had now become an uncontrollable force, mutating at an alarming rate. But there was one more thing that Zalnora hadn't yet shared with Hayes, one last detail she hadn't fully understood until now. The key to the adaptive accelerators isn't just in how they respond to stress, Zalnora said, her voice growing soft as the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. It's how they react to the perception of stress. The human mind, the collective consciousness of your species, it feeds into this process. The accelerators respond not only to physical threats, but also to emotional and psychological ones. Fear, panic, those things are amplifying the mutation process. Hayes's brow furrowed as she processed this new information. So, if the humans here are panicking, that could be causing the mutations to spiral out of control? Zalnora nodded. Exactly. The stress response is accelerating the changes, making them even more unpredictable. The mind's ability to influence the body, to direct evolution, is what makes humanity so unique, but it's also what makes the mutations so dangerous. Captain Hayes stood still for a moment, her gaze focused as she considered the implications. Then we need to stabilize the colony, calm them down. If we can lower the stress levels, we might be able to slow the mutations down long enough to reverse the damage. Zalnora looked back at the data stream. It might not be enough. The damage is already done for many of them, and the mutations are taking on a life of their own. But you're right. We can't do this with science alone. We need to find a way to manage the fear, the panic, and we need to do it quickly. Hayes turned to the door, her expression hardening. I'll organize a team to go to the central nerve station. We can broadcast calming messages, help mediate the fear. It won't fix everything, but it might buy us the time we need. Zalnora stood in the middle of the room, watching as Hayes left with a renewed sense of urgency. For all of humanity's power, they were still at the mercy of their own biology. The adaptive accelerators that had made them so extraordinary had now become their greatest enemy. The ability to control their evolution could no longer be trusted, it had to be contained. And she knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. Hours later, Zalnora stood before the remaining unaltered humans in the colony. The medical teams had managed to stabilize a few of the worst cases, but the damage was extensive. As she looked out at the group of survivors, she could see the fear in their eyes, the same fear that had triggered the mutations in the first place. But now, the fear was tempered by a new realization. Their very survival depended on whether or not they could trust the systems they had put in place to control their biology. It's working, Captain Hayes said, stepping up beside her. The broadcasts have calmed a significant portion of the population. We've stabilized the stress levels. The mutations have slowed down. Zalnora exhaled in relief. Though it was a cautious relief, the genetic instability had not been eradicated, but the immediate danger had passed. We've managed to halt the spread, Zalnora replied, though her voice was tinged with doubt. But the question remains, can humanity continue to wield this power responsibly? Can they keep the accelerators from spiraling out of control again? Hayes's expression darkened, but her resolve remained unshaken. We have no choice. Humanity has to adapt, but we also have to learn to control it. If we fail, we risk becoming something else. We risk becoming a threat to ourselves and to the galaxy. Zalnora's gaze shifted toward the stars visible from the colony's observation deck. You're right. The power to evolve is both a gift and a curse. But you must remember, every gift comes with a price. And this one may be greater than anyone realizes. As Zalnora and Hayes stood side by side, watching the colony slowly return to some semblance of normalcy, both women knew the same truth. Humanity had reached the cusp of something extraordinary, but the future they now faced was uncertain. Could they control the power they had unlocked, or would they ultimately be consumed by it? Only time would tell, but for now, humanity had survived. And that, for all its flaws, was enough to give them hope.